The Young and the Restless, spoilers full next week, March 30 to the 3rd of April 2026. There are weeks in Genoa City when everything feels like it is building toward a single irreversible collapse, when every character stands at the edge of a decision that will define not only their future, but the version of themselves they will have to live with afterward. This is one of those moments where ambition, desperation, guilt, and manipulation collide in a way that feels almost suffocating. The lines between right and wrong are no longer clean, and perhaps more importantly, the characters themselves no longer trust their own instincts. What begins as separate storylines, Phyllis confronting Lily, Nick hunting Matt and Danny, offering a life-changing opportunity, slowly converge into a web of consequences where no one walks away untouched. Apparently, there's no new actors good enough or writers that can write for Y&R, so they got to keep bringing back the crazies. Wonder if I can get a job. I got lots of storylines to be considered, Paul. Coming back would be refreshing. At least he wasn't crazy. Drug, alcohol addiction with anyone. It's been rewritten so many times, starting with Catherine Chancellor. Enough with the depressing stories. The writers just want to wreck the good characters, hoping it ends soon with him going to rehab. Phyllis Summers steps into this chaos with a familiar fire, but this time her anger feels less like strategy and more like a defensive reaction to something she cannot fully control. Her decision to go after Lily Winters is rooted in a belief that she has been wronged, that her warnings were ignored, and that the fallout from Victor Newman's actions is now being unfairly redirected onto her. Phyllis has always thrived in confrontation, but what makes this particular clash more compelling is the emotional undercurrent beneath it. She is not just accusing Lily of complicity in a kidnapping scheme. She is trying to reclaim her narrative to prove that she was not the architect of the chaos, but a voice that went unheard. And yet, there is a certain irony in Phyllis's position that cannot be ignored. She is demanding to be believed in a world where she has often manipulated truth for her own advantage. This does not make her wrong, but it does complicate her credibility. When she points out that she warned Kane Ashby about the lack of danger, she is technically defending herself, but emotionally she is also confronting a pattern, the inability of others to trust her, even when she might be telling the truth. It is a frustrating and, in many ways, self-inflicted dilemma. The story becomes stronger when it allows that contradiction to exist without simplifying it. Phyllis is both justified and compromised, both victim and participant, and that duality fuels the intensity of her confrontation with Lily. Lily, on the other hand, is placed in an equally difficult position, one that tests her sense of loyalty, responsibility, and moral clarity. Being accused of complicity in Victor's plan forces her to confront the uncomfortable reality that even indirect involvement in someone else's scheme can carry consequences. Whether she intended harm or not becomes almost secondary to the perception of her actions. In a world driven by power and influence, proximity to wrongdoing can be just as damaging as the act itself. Lily must decide whether to defend herself aggressively, risking escalation, or to step back and absorb the accusation, risking her reputation. Neither choice is clean, and that is what gives the conflict its weight. Meanwhile, far from the corporate battles and emotional confrontations, another storyline unfolds with a quieter but equally powerful tension. Danny Romalotti's offer to Tessa Porter and Daniel Romalatti appears at first glance to be a rare moment of hope, a reminder that not everything in this world is driven by conflict. The opportunity to open for Danny's concert in Barcelona represents more than a career milestone. It represents escape growth and the possibility of redefining one's path. For Daniel, it is a chance to step out of the shadow of his past and build something meaningful. For Tessa, it is validation of her talent and a doorway into a future she has worked tirelessly to reach. But this opportunity arrives at the worst possible time, and that is what transforms it from a blessing into a dilemma. Mariah Copeland's fragile state places Tessa in an emotional bind that is impossible to ignore. Mariah is not just struggling, she is unraveling, caught in the aftermath of her own psychological collapse and the consequences of actions she can barely reconcile with herself. Tessa's instinct is to stay, to support, to be the anchor Mariah desperately needs. And yet, staying comes at a cost. It means turning down a once-in-a-lifetime chance, a decision that could alter the trajectory of her entire career. This is where the story becomes deeply human because it forces a question that has no easy answer. What does loyalty demand? And at what point does sacrifice become self-erasure? Tessa is not choosing between right and wrong. She is choosing between two versions of her future, both of which carry emotional consequences. If she leaves, she risks abandoning Mariah at her lowest point. If she stays, she risks losing an opportunity that may never come again. And in my view, this is exactly the kind of conflict that elevates the narrative, because it does not rely on villains or schemes, but on the painful reality of competing priorities and the limits of what one person can give. At the same time, Nick Newman's storyline takes on a far more dangerous trajectory, one that moves steadily toward a confrontation that feels inevitable, yet increasingly out of his control. His determination to track down Matt Clark is driven by a mixture of anger, pride, and a need to regain control over a situation that has been slipping away from him. Nick has always been a man of action, someone who believes that facing the threat head-on is the only way to neutralize it. But what he fails to realize is that this is exactly what Matt is counting on. Matt is not running, he is hunting. And the distinction between those two roles is crucial. By allowing Nick to believe he is the one in pursuit, Matt maintains the illusion of control while carefully orchestrating every step of the encounter. The introduction of the drug dealer in Nick's hotel room becomes one of the most chilling elements of this arc. The small bag of white powder, presented casually as excess supply, is not just a temptation. It is a test, a trap, and possibly a weapon. The mention of fentanyl raises the stakes dramatically because this is no longer about recreational misuse or emotional escape. It is about life and death, about a substance that can kill in the smallest of doses. The question of whether the dealer is working for Matt lingers in the background, but the more unsettling possibility is that it almost does not matter. Even if the dealer is independent, Matt has already created the conditions necessary for this moment to exist. Nick is isolated, vulnerable, and already relying on substances to cope with pain. The presence of the drug is simply the final push, the moment where internal weakness meets external opportunity. And if the dealer is indeed connected to Matt, then the plan becomes even more sinister, transforming from manipulation into attempted execution. What makes Nick's situation so tragic is that his actions are understandable, even as they become increasingly dangerous. He is not acting out of recklessness alone. He is trying to reclaim control to prove that he is not a victim, to assert that he can still fight back. But in doing so, he walks directly into the scenario Matt has designed for him. This is the essence of the winner-takes-all game Matt is playing. It is not about a fair fight. It is about ensuring that every move Nick makes brings him closer to defeat. As these storylines begin to intersect, the emotional weight intensifies. Phyllis's confrontation with Lily adds pressure to an already unstable environment, amplifying tensions within the broader network of alliances and rivalries. Tessa's dilemma introduces a quieter but equally painful conflict, reminding us that not all battles are fought in public or with obvious stakes. And Nick's descent into a dangerous confrontation with Matt anchors the entire narrative in a sense of impending catastrophe. From a broader perspective, what stands out is how each character is forced to confront a version of themselves they may not want to acknowledge. Phyllis must face the consequences of her own reputation. Lily must grapple with the implications of her associations. Tessa must decide what kind of partner and artist she wants to be. And Nick must confront the possibility that his greatest enemy is not just Matt Clark, but the part of himself that refuses to admit vulnerability. If there is a unifying theme in all of this, it is the idea that control is an illusion. Every character believes they are making choices, but those choices are shaped by circumstances, emotions, and pressures that limit their freedom in ways they may not fully understand. Matt Clark exploits that illusion more effectively than anyone else, turning it into a weapon that does not just target individuals, but the relationships that bind them together. And as the tension continues to build, one cannot help but feel that the eventual outcome, whether it is Matt's downfall or Nick's survival, will not feel like a victory in the traditional sense, because by the time the final move is made, the damage will already be done. Trust will be fractured, identities will be shaken, and the cost of every decision will linger long after the immediate threat has been eliminated. In a game where the winner takes all, the truth may be far more unsettling. Sometimes even the winner loses more than they ever expected. There are moments in Genoa City when power stops being about control and starts becoming about obsession, when every decision, no matter how justified it may appear on the surface, carries the unmistakable weight of something darker beneath it. And this is one of those moments where the lines between protection and domination, loyalty and blindness, justice and revenge are no longer clear, and the people who once believed they were in control of their own narratives begin to realize that they have been shaped, cornered, and pushed by forces both external and deeply internal. What unfolds now is not just another chapter of rivalry between powerful families. It is a slow-burning collapse of trust, identity, and moral certainty, and every character stands dangerously close to the edge. Adam Newman's descent into his darker persona, the identity he once buried under layers of reinvention, signals something far more unsettling than a simple relapse. The return of Spider is not accidental, and it is certainly not harmless. It represents Adam's quiet admission that the version of himself built on restraint, on calculated diplomacy, has failed to protect him, failed to give him the power he believes he deserves. There is a dangerous clarity in that realization. When a man decides that his worst instincts are not weaknesses but tools, he stops fearing the consequences. He begins to welcome them. And that shift is what makes Adam's current trajectory so volatile. He is no longer trying to prove he has changed. He is trying to prove that he never needed to. His involvement in high-stakes games, his willingness to step into environments defined by deception and risk becomes more than just a distraction, it becomes a declaration. Adam is choosing chaos, but not blindly. He is choosing it because he believes chaos is the only space where he truly thrives. That belief, however, carries a cost that he may not fully grasp yet, because when you embrace your darkest self, you do not just gain power, you lose the ability to step back from the edge when things begin to spiral. And in a world already manipulated by someone like Matt Clark, that loss of control could become catastrophic. At the same time, Jack Abbott finds himself confronted with a ghost from his past, one that refuses to stay buried and instead resurfaces with a disturbing sense of inevitability. Patty Williams' return is not just an unwelcome surprise, it is a psychological threat, a reminder of a history that has always hovered at the edges of Jack's life, waiting for the right moment to reassert itself. Patty does not need to be overtly dangerous to be destabilizing. Her presence alone is enough to shake the fragile sense of normalcy Jack has been trying to maintain, especially after everything he has endured. What makes this situation even more complicated is the timing. Jack is already dealing with the fallout of Diane's sudden departure, a decision that has left him questioning not just his relationship, but his own judgment. The revelation that something happened on the yacht involving a mysterious woman only deepens the confusion. Jack is left with fragments of information, half-truths, that refuse to align into a coherent picture, and the growing suspicion that he has been manipulated yet again. Patty's arrival at this precise moment feels less like coincidence and more like a deliberate disruption, as if the past itself is conspiring against him. Diane Jenkins, meanwhile, is not simply retreating. Her absence is strategic, whether she fully admits it or not. Whatever occurred on that yacht has shaken her enough to pull away, but not enough to disengage entirely. Her confrontation with Victoria Newman alongside Kyle Abbott becomes a reflection of a larger conflict that extends beyond personal grievances. It is about control, about influence, about Who has the right to dictate the narrative and who is left reacting to it? Diane and Kyle are not just defending themselves. They are trying to reclaim ground that has been steadily eroded by the Newmans' dominance. Victoria, as always, stands firmly on her father's side, but this time her loyalty feels less like confidence and more like reflex. There is a subtle but important difference. She is defending Victor not because she fully agrees with his actions, but because she cannot afford to question him. In her world, doubt is a liability and loyalty is a form of survival. Yet that unwavering support begins to crack when Nikki steps forward, no longer willing to remain silent, no longer willing to justify Victor's methods as necessary evils. The confrontation between Nikki and Victoria becomes one of the most emotionally charged aspects of this entire storyline because it is not just a disagreement. It is a collision of values, of perspectives, shaped by years of living under the same man's influence, but interpreting his actions in fundamentally different ways. Nikki sees the cost of Victor's obsession, the damage inflicted not just on his enemies, but on the people closest to him. Victoria sees the results, the victories, the preservation of power. Both are right in their own way, and that is what makes their conflict so painful. There is no easy resolution when both sides are rooted in truth. Nikki's decision to stand against Victor marks a significant shift, one that carries both emotional and narrative weight. She is not acting out of rebellion. She is acting out of exhaustion, out of a deep-seated need to draw a line that has been blurred for far too long. Her refusal to condone Victor's kidnapping of Jack is not just about that single act. It is about everything it represents. The willingness to cross boundaries, to justify extreme measures in the name of control, to treat people as pieces in a larger game. Nikki has reached a point where she can no longer ignore the consequences of those choices. Victoria's reaction defending Victor while acknowledging the effectiveness of his actions reveals the dangerous normalization of that mindset. Effectiveness becomes justification. Results become absolution. And that is where the moral foundation begins to erode. Because when success is used to excuse wrongdoing, the line between strategy and cruelty disappears entirely. This is where I find the storyline particularly compelling because it does not present these dynamics as simple right or wrong. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that power often thrives on moral compromise and that those who benefit from it are rarely eager to question its cost. The tension escalates further when Nikki makes it clear that she intends to hold Victor accountable to teach him a lesson he has avoided for far too long. This is not a threat made lightly. It is a declaration of intent, one that introduces a new kind of danger into the equation. Because if Victoria chooses to warn Victor, she is not just protecting her father. She is undermining her mother, deepening a divide that may not be easily repaired. And if she chooses to remain silent, she risks allowing a confrontation that could have far-reaching consequences for the entire family. At the center of all of this, the broader web of conflict continues to tighten. Adam's embrace of Spider places him on a path that may intersect with Matt Clark's manipulation in ways that neither fully anticipates. Jack's destabilization leaves him vulnerable at a time when he needs clarity the most. Diane and Kyle's confrontation with Victoria adds another layer of tension to an already volatile environment. And Nikki's decision to challenge Victor introduces a potential fracture within the Newman family itself. What makes this entire narrative so gripping is the sense that every character is acting out of a deeply personal motivation, yet those motivations are colliding in ways that amplify the chaos rather than resolve it. No one is entirely right. No one is entirely wrong. And every decision carries consequences that extend beyond the individual rippling outward to affect everyone connected to them. In many ways, this is a story about control and the illusion of it. Victor believes he can control outcomes through force and strategy. Adam believes he can control his destiny by embracing his darker instincts. Victoria believes she can maintain stability through loyalty. Nikki believes she can restore balance by drawing a line, but control in this context is fragile. It is constantly challenged, constantly undermined by the unpredictable nature of human emotion and the hidden agendas that drive each character. As the pieces continue to move, one cannot help but feel that the eventual fallout will not be contained to a single confrontation or a single revelation. It will be cumulative, a slow unraveling of relationships, trust, and identity. And when the dust settles, the question will not simply be who won or who lost. It will be who is left standing and what they have become in the process. Because in a world where power is everything, the greatest danger is not losing it. It is losing yourself while trying to hold on to it,